Good afternoon, this is Peter Towers from ESS BIZTOOLS. Welcome to this webinar on ESS BIZGRANTS. There's people still coming to the site. And some of you were with us yesterday, so welcome back. And I hope that you will get some real benefit out of this insight into government grants. Government grants are a very important area, we believe, as part of the servicing for small, medium enterprises. Just while we're waiting for the last few people to register, we might just get started though. There's the key benefits from being proactive in offering grants to your clients is that you're in control of the process. And it's a great entry for business advisory services, because a lot of the work that the grants require is work that accountants who are undertaking business advisory services work can undertake. And the benefit from your small business clients, they are able to obtain from assistance from a government department, normally about 50% of the cost of a project that they might have wanted to do for some time. So it's worth thinking about as to the benefits that grants can give to your firm. Unfortunately, the vast majority of accounting firms don't seem to be too interested in grants, so this will give you an opportunity to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And those of you who were with us yesterday will remember we discussed digital disruption. And one of the suggestions that Deloitte has made as to what firms should do is to develop new revenue bases to overcome the forecast 32% change that's going to occur to accountancy businesses over time. One way to create some additional revenue would be through being very proactive in offering government grant services to your clients. And there's some fairly attractive grants at present. Accelerating commercialisation is the current government's flagship of the grants, a grant of up to $1 million. Your clients have to contribute 50%, and the turnover can be from nil to $20 million. So it's worth thinking about as to the type of grants that you might be able to obtain. So what we're going to do now is we're on the website, and we're going to go into the profiles to insert a new client into the profile area. Every business has to be entered into the profile so that you can get started. So I'm just going to call a business Western Fabricators. Proprietary Limited, so we put the name in. Now you've then got to select the entity type. I'll just move that up a bit. The entity type is very important. I cannot think of a government grant that applies to small medium enterprises that a company is not eligible for, but a lot of these other entities have only got some grants that they're eligible for. So that's why we want you to go through and identify the type of entity that your client is operating the business in that will be claiming the grant. So that might give you a clue where certain work might have to be done at times. It's the claimant that we're looking for here. What is their entity? The next question is, do they export? Well, we're going to say in this hypothetical, incidentally, this business, Western Fabricators, is in Footscray in Melbourne, and hypothetically they do a turnover of $8 million and they employ 25 people. And they've been in business for about 10 years, and they export. And they also do some importing, so we'll answer yes to that. We've then got to answer the number of employees, and I said to you they had 25, so they're in the 20 to 200 category. These bands for employees are based on the requirements of various grants. So you can have nil employees, others you can have somewhere between none and 20, and 20 to 200 then gets mentioned. I must admit, over 200, most grants are saying that they're for larger businesses, or 201 is the cutoff, that you might not be eligible for a number of grants. So we've said 20 to 200 because we've got 25 employees. Do you have an ABN? You need to answer yes to that. So hopefully your client has. They've been in business with us 8-10 years. So I'm sure they'd have an ABN. The material we've included in ESS BIZGRANTS is the grants we've selected for small, medium enterprises, and to apply for any of those grants, the business has to have an ABN. How many years have you been operating? I said this business has been operating 10 years, but we've also introduced the same sort of band concept because different grants have got different requirements for the years that the business has been operating. So we click here over 3 years. We're then going to answer the financial details. And again, we have turnover bands. These are the turnover levels that are mentioned in various grants. I indicated to you that the turnover of this business was $8 million. So that means it's going to fall in the band $1.5 million to $20 million. Are you registered for GST? The business needs to be registered to obtain a government grant. Are you tax exempt? The business isn't. It's an operating company. If you answer yes to that, you won't be shown any grants for that applicant because we're not including grants for not-for-profits and charities in ESS BIZGRANTS. And are you involved in research and development? Yeah, we are. We do a bit of R&D work, but also that can be a clue to our system that you might be eligible for some other grants such as accelerating commercialisation, because we can't envisage that someone could be applying for accelerating commercialisation if they haven't done research and development. We're not saying at this stage whether you're going to be eligible to claim research and development. We just want to know whether you've done it, because obviously to claim it you have to be operating as a company and you have to have spent more than $20,000 in aggregate on R&D projects during the year. So we can save that information now. Now in actual practice that would have taken about a maximum of 3 minutes for someone who knows something about the file to go through and put that data in. We are using cloud technology, so you can leave it in the system and use that same material again next year. It might just need a bit of an update on employees and turnovers. If you don't want to record your client's name in the cloud, you can insert a number or a code, but obviously you're responsible for that. So let's put in an address. Hopefully this is an address or a fictitious address. And I decided we're going to go to Melbourne today for this presentation, so we click on Victoria, and I think I found before the postcode was 3111. So what that's done for us is told us that Footscray is in a major city of Australia. We've kept those classifications there because every so often government departments bring in grants for various locations. One stage they were very popular a couple of years ago. They're on the wane a bit at present. In fact, the only real reason for it at present is the medical grants have got certain grants that are available in certain areas, mainly to encourage specialists to decentralise out of CBD areas into outer metropolitan areas or to regional areas, but still in all we've kept it in there, but it doesn't play any major part, especially for this business, which is a steel fabricating type business. Now, we're now able to look at the business industry codes. If you know the business industry code as utilised by the Australian Taxation Office, and you've included that in the tax return, you can immediately just lodge that number into the space there. I'll just get a highlighter so you can very clearly. So in that space there, you just insert the number and immediately click on Search Grants. The system will then locate the grants that apply to the industry code that you've inserted. If you don't know the number but you know part of the keyword, you can insert part of the keyword that describes that sort of business, and the system will identify from the Australian Taxation Office database the businesses that apply, and then you can select it, and I'll show you that in a moment. Or you can click on and go to the ATO site, and it will give you a list of the business industry codes. 2014 is the most recent edition of that document, and you're probably aware of this. This can appear in an alphabetical index or an index of industries according to the Bureau of Statistics. So you can go through this and select the reference number either on an alphabetical basis or go through the actual hierarchical industry summaries to get the details. So if we come back to where we were, we still haven't got a industry code. I said this was a steel fabricator, so I'm going to insert the word steel and hit search. So we could have got it from entering the code number in ourselves. We could have selected it from going to the ATO list, or you can have the computer do the search for you. So we've located a number of industry types that have the word steel in them. I said before this was a structural steel fabricator, so I think this is the one that probably adequately summarizes it, and obviously if you knew the number you would have inserted that in the first place. If you just click on that number, it is then transferred that industry there as what this business does. And you might say, oh okay, we also have a some other work that's done. We do some labouring, we do some fabric installation on site. So we'll put that over there as well. So we've got two. You can have as many as you want that might adequately describe what this client does. So when you've done that, all you need to do now is to click on Search Grants. And the system is now going to go through and find grants. Now there are always potential duplications. You can only apply for one grant once because some grants fall into, or potentially fall into, a couple of different industry classifications. So we've got 22, so let's go through. We've got Accelerating Commercialisation, which is the largest government grant. That's because this business is a fabricator. They're in the preferred industry target. Their turnovers fit within the criteria. They indicated they were doing research and development, so if they have developed a new product, process or service, they could be eligible for that grant. There's apprenticeship incentives. We've come up with 4 of them for this particular set of circumstances. Those are the apprenticeship incentives that are available for virtually every employer in Australia. Word of caution, the government has announced last year that they're going to change the apprenticeship scheme from the 1st of July this year. I haven't seen anything since the Prime Minister made that announcement in about October last year. Presumably they're working on it, and perhaps in the budget we're going to find out what the new apprenticeship scheme is going to be. Australian Bureau of Statistics is free information that used to cost about $8,000 when Peter Costello was the Treasurer. He changed all that to make it free. There's some great information there that I would encourage you to show your clients so they realise they can go on there and get that. Business growth grants, there's been an overlap there that could apply to a couple of different industries. Certain input to manufacturers has come about because this business is a manufacturer. We said they are exporters, so we got the Export Market Development Grant. Industry Capability Network is a great way to promote your clients' businesses. If your clients are making something or are available for contract work, they should be registered on that free register, which is run by the federal government and the state governments. Industry Skills Funds, the new federal government grant that started in mid-January that offers funding for skills development. Has to be real skills development, and the grants vary compared on the number of employees, so we'll have a better look at that in a moment. Research Connections, there's some duplications here because that profile could have been appropriate under 3 different industry classifications there, but it's for someone who's doing research that wants to get up to $50,000 in grant fund. And then we've got some grants that are applicable in Victoria. The Victorian government is very active in the grant space, and our systems identified that this client could have be considered eligible for some technology voucher programs that are offered in Victoria under a couple of different programs that they run. So let's just go back to the top, and I'm just going to pick 2 or 3 of these to go through to give you an idea how this system works. Accelerating commercialization. So there's a summary of what the grant's about. So there's grants of up to $1 million on a 50-50 basis. So then we just got a summary on the funding. We've got there the minimum amount's $5,000. There's no announcement on that, but in actual practice you probably should be looking at a bit higher than that. The government expects the average grant under this fund to be $240,000. We then have an application toolkit which is giving you a paper that you can read to explain how this grant operates. So this is the ESS BIZTOOLS paper. Those of you who were with us yesterday would have seen some of these papers. This is the ESS BIZTOOLS paper on accelerating commercialization. So it's a detailed summary, hopefully put into more layman's terminology, but it's highlighting the merit criteria requirements. There's a lot in this grant, therefore it's a fairly detailed paper, as you can see. Covers a lot of activities. And to get this grant, the applicant requires an audit or an accountant's certificate, basically to say that the cash flow that's been submitted is reasonable. So then the paper gives a summary of how you go about identifying potential clients for this grant. And how the system works. So if you want to, you could sit down and read that and get a great idea as to the application process. Or you could print it off and give it to your client so they could read it. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions, can you please type them in to the computer, and in webinar jargon, raise your hand, and I'll try and answer the questions later on during this webinar. So that's how that part of the system works. We then have to answer some additional criteria, because what we have done in the first instance is tried to, by filling in the profile and then identifying the industries that the business operates in, we're trying to narrow down the possibilities, and we've done that to a certain extent. But then to try to really pinpoint whether this client has got a real chance of being eligible for this grant, we have to ask some additional questions. Now, in some of the grants there's only 1 or 2 questions. This one's got 5. I think the maximum we got on any grant in the system is 8 questions. Obviously it gets back to how complicated the grant might be. So, has the applicant developed a novel product, process or service? They need to have done that, so we answer yes. If the applicant is not a company, will the applicant agree to form a company and have the company prepared by the time that the contract will be signed with the government? So an individual, a partnership, a trust, any of those sort of entities can consider applying for this grant, but by the time they want to receive any money, they have to have incorporated a company, because that's the entity that this program specified the government will deal with. Does the applicant have the ability to fund 50% of the project expenditure and complete the project within 2 years? Now, you've got an idea of how the client works, or you might have rung the client, or you might even have the client sitting in front of you as you're doing this. And obviously it depends on the magnitude. And you might answer yes at this stage just to get the report so you can sit down and have a conversation with the client. It does get back to how much you know what your client's doing. You may need your client there on the end of a telephone or an email. The important thing to remember is the client doesn't have to have their 50% on the day that they apply for the grant, or indeed even when they receive the first tranche of the grant. What they need to be able to do is satisfy the government that they are going to be able to fund their share of the project as that money is required. All that the government will ever do is pay 50%. In the first instance, AusIndustry will authorise 50% of the first 3 months' estimated expenditure, so to be paid to the client plus GST. So if the first 3 months' estimate of expenditure is, say, $50,000, the government would pay 50% of that, $25,000 plus GST. If the second quarter required expenditure of $100,000, they would only pay 50% of that, $50,000, as long as the total expenditure of $50,000 has been finalised in the first quarter. And that would obviously require your client to have contributed their money to enable that to have occurred. If only $40,000 was spent in the first quarter, therefore the government would normally have only advanced $20,000, they will reduce by $5,000 the advance payment that they're making in the second quarter. And that's how the process keeps on working. The government's at risk to a certain extent, but they are trying to limit it, and it's up to the client to be able to produce their share of the contribution. Can the applicant justify the funding is required? Most small businesses can do that. Copies of financial accounts have to be submitted, so I'd be reluctant having an applicant going in for a huge grant if there's a lot of money in the company's bank account. If there is, it would be a good idea to make a comment on the application as to what that money is needed for. It might be needed for another capital expenditure project that the company's committed to. There might be a disputed amount with the Australian Taxation Office. And does the applicant have the ownership or control of the intellectual property that's needed for the project? And they need to have done that. So we've answered yes, Now what the system then brought up was apply now. If we click onto there, we are going to get the URL of the government's business site, and if we click on that we get the expression of interest form, because that's what you've got to do with Commercialisation Australia, and you can then proceed. But at this stage all we want to do is get the report, so we're going to click close, and the system's then going to determine whether we might be eligible. So when we started we had 22 grants. Under potentially eligible we now have accelerating commercialisation. Now I have a question which is a very interesting one, and that is, what kind of fees would we be charging for this type of service, and how is it allowed to be paid? That is, does the client have to pay it out of funds not related to the grant? The grant we were on is accelerating commercialisation. It's the largest grant. It is a complicated application process that is in effect in two tiers. The first one is the completion of an expression of interest, which requires a fair amount of work to be done, and the second one then is a detailed application. The sort of fee that I'd be charging for that sort of work would vary as a percentage of the total amount of grant, because if you're going to apply for $1 million worth of grant, you need to really make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. My ballpark estimate, though, to you, to answer this question, would be a fee of somewhere around $7,000 to $8,000 minimum, up to around $20,000. They're the fees being charged for these types of grants in the marketplace by experienced consultants, and if you're going to be doing that sort of work, that's the sort of fees that will be appropriate, because there's a fair bit of work to be done in making sure the client succeeds. The payment of the funds is not officially out of the grant. Now, that's probably all I can say on that, that there may be some allocations under the grant. The government department, Oz Industry, and the Entrepreneur's Infrastructure Program doesn't know anything about the commercial arrangements that's been entered into, but you need to be careful, because there's a general prohibition on claiming anything that has been incurred prior to the grant being approved. So the true answer there, or the correct answer, is the client needs to find that money from their own resources, which can be difficult for some of these clients, especially if they've developed a brand new product themselves. But bear in mind, they have to find 50%, and if they can't get this grant, the project's probably going to go nowhere. There are investors who, mainly business angels, who do invest in companies who are undertaking these sort of projects, and in some cases they will make a condition of their investment that they will not invest until the company has been approved for this grant, and that can be the source of the funding for the payment of the fee to assist in the application being submitted. If you've got any particular individual cases you want to talk to me about, can you please send me an email or give me a ring. I'm just going to move through and pick out another one now. We'll pick out Export Market Development Grant. We said this business was an exporter. Now, we haven't updated yet. It will be getting done. We do it in May each year, this material, because the 2014 year Export Market Development Grant application period is closed. So at this stage, there's really no grants open on this. Because the next year finishes at the 30th of June 15. But we go through it just so you get the idea. You can claim up to $150,000 on a 50% basis. We have the toolkit, which gives you the paper, but also in this one we've got an additional form which summarises the type of expenditure that can be claimed under the Export Market Development Grant. In my experience, a number of accountants don't seem to know much about this grant, and Austrade, who administer it for the government, would tell you that there's a lot of small businesses miss out on this grant because they don't know about it or their accountant doesn't know about it. So there's a summary of the type of expenses that can be incurred. There's a detailed list. You really need to be recording this expenditure during the year, not running around trying to do it all at the end of the year. And there are various sub-limits, as you can see, for some of those expenditure items, but your client could secure an overall grant of up to $150,000. Now, the way this works is you can lodge as soon as you like after the 30th of June 2015. The closing date is the 30th of November, or the closest working day to that date. If your application is for around $50,000 to $60,000 refund, and as long as they've got no questions, you will get paid that amount very quickly. If you're claiming the full $150,000, the way the system works is you would get paid a pro rata amount of approximately $60,000 fairly quickly after you've lodged the return, and the balance is then determined based on what the total amounts of outstanding claims are against the pool of money that's left, because there is a finite amount of money that's available for this grant, and that money normally gets paid out in late May, early June each year. But still, it's a great way of getting some money back for clients who have expended money on developing markets overseas. We then need to look at some additional criteria. Have you spent money to seek out, create demand for, or develop an export market? Yes, you don't have to have made export sales, you might notice from that definition. So in fact, if you've spent the minimum amount of money and haven't even made any sales yet, as long as you've done the work, you can make this claim. If you're claiming overseas representation, have you maintained documentary evidence? We say yes, we've done that. If you're claiming expenses under marketing visits, have you maintained full records? You really do need to impress on your clients that they need to maintain proper records for this grant. If they've claimed 2 years in a row, they should have had a discussion with Austrade, so we'll say yes, we've done that. The aggregate amount is $20,000, but the first claim year can in fact be over a 2-year period. Now, these dates have all got to get updated for the new year, but basically you can go back 2 years. Unfortunately, sales to New Zealand are not included in the Export Market Development Grant, and our New Zealand friends don't like being bracketed with North Korea and Iran, but unfortunately they are, for different reasons, of course. So we say, yes, we're going to spend $20,000. And is the business the principal? The business needs to be the principal for the export business. Apply Now has now appeared. If we went onto that URL, we're going onto the Austrade website, whereby we can submit an application to Austrade. If you've got a client that's new to all this and this is their first claim year, it's a good idea to lodge the notification of intention to lodge a claim form as soon as possible, so that Austrade have got the opportunity of visiting the business or making contact with them, and they can then give some expert advice and make available other resources that they've got available, because they are very keen to assist exporters, and we all should be doing that. When you look at the state of the Australian economy at present, there's a very good reason why our interest rates are only 2.25%. That's because there's a lot of problems out there. Export markets are one great opportunity to create some real business activity for a lot of the small, medium enterprise market. And thousands of them are exporting and doing so very successfully. The other grant that I've just picked up, the third one we're going to show you today, is the Industry Skills Fund. This is the new grant that the government announced or implemented in January. They announced it in about September last year. It took under mid-January to get started. So there's the grant summary. It's got specific benefits for micro businesses, so up to 4 full-time equivalents. You can get a grant of 75% of the expenditure. No expenditure amounts are mentioned, but there is a total amount of $450 million allocated. So there's a fair number of grants. Now this grant has got priority industries, but you can apply for this grant if you're not in those priority industries, as long as you've got a compelling case. I've had some people contact me and say, geez, there's not many industries in these priority industries. Well, I can assure you, when we go through and do the back end of ESS BIZGRANTS to put in all the grant eligibility, these lists here, there are hundreds of grants covered under those headings, because we've had to make sure they're all in the system. So if you, hundreds of industries, not grants, hundreds of industries covered by those definitions there, and a lot of businesses are potentially eligible for those grants. So the funding, as I said before, is based on number of full-time equivalent employees. So there's the summary there. So a small business gets 66%. So this business we're doing here, we said they had 25 employees, I think. So the medium business, they would get 50% of an approved skill development program. And large businesses, that 200 plus full-time equivalents, would only get 25%. We go to the toolkit, we can bring up the paper, you can read that, you become very familiar with how the Industry Skills Fund operates, so that you can have the discussion with your client. And bear in mind, even though there are priority industries, other industries can apply as long as you have a compelling argument as to the benefits that your business is going to, or your client's business is going to achieve from this type of training. And we go to additional criteria. Is the applicant a company? So I forgot to mention that under this one, they have to be a company or a corporate trustee. Corporate trustees are slowly being admitted into some of these federal government programs. Other proposed learners have not previously done this course. Are they permanent residents, or if they're a New Zealand passport holder, they've been here for 6 months? So yes, hopefully that's the case for your client. Is the business positioning itself to take up a growth opportunity? That's what this is all about. And if they were doing it in an export market, that would be great. Can the applicant articulate and demonstrate how the productivity gains will benefit the Australian economy? Actually, I like the way all these government grants are drafted, but we've got to play the game and say yes. And obviously, in the application, we have got to articulate that there will be productivity gains. Can the applicant show demonstrate the link between the opportunity and the skills gap? So the client will need to determine skills gap. Now, there are government contractors who are all previously in private enterprise who are available to assist in this process, so the applicant hasn't got to sit down and do all this on their own. Can the applicant demonstrate the value, that they're going to get value for money? That will vary, of course, based on what the quotation is for the services to be provided. If it was a few $1,000s, that's probably going to be fairly easy to justify. If it was $100,000 for our 25-person business, I'd suggest they would really need to be making sure they supply a full and detailed answer to that question. And can the applicant demonstrate that they've got the capabilities to successfully manage this type of project? So we say yes. So on that basis, we could apply now by going onto the Skills Fund Development Grant, and we're now going to update the grant application. Now, that's all I've got time to go through on that basis. We're obviously taking a bit of time there because we've been discussing some other issues. We're going to go back to potentially eligible, and we've got those 3 grants. If the system had decided that we were potentially ineligible on anything, that would have been put into this area. We go back to potentially eligible. The system's asked us, do we want to produce a report? We can now produce the report. So the grant report has the, must have been the way I typed that, the name of the client. It will have your name as the subscriber, not ESS BIZTOOLS, your name, and obviously it's dated today's date. It then has the executive summary of the grants that have been identified, that you can then sit down and have a cup of coffee with your client and have a conversation with them about the opportunities that are presented. The disclaimer at the bottom is basically saying that whilst the system's indicating they're potentially eligible, there's no guarantee given because they've still got to go through the process of applying for a government grant and dealing with a government department, and there can be a number of reasons why a particular applicant might not be accepted. The Export Market Development Grant, there's a summary there for how that works, and the Industry Skills Fund. So, in effect, our proposition to you is you've done this processing. Our suggestion is at this time of the year that you should be making the completion of this profile part of the function on every business client. Don't assume that grants are not available for certain businesses. Grants are available for a very wide range of businesses. Why not put them into the system? About 3 minutes to put the profile in. Admittedly, 5 or 6 minutes could be spent by someone who knows the client, so probably at the manager or even partner level, to think about the answers to some of those other detailed questions. But then you're in a position to sit down and have a conversation with your client to show that you are very proactive in assisting them to look at this opportunity. Now, what can happen from there is probably one of 3 things. The client can decline, and some people will. They want nothing to do with governments, and you're not going to do much about those people, I don't think. The second one is a very small number of clients will say, thank you very much, take the report away, and will perhaps do something themselves. In other words, they'll go on and try to access it. They haven't got a lot of information to do that. They haven't got access to the URLs, for argument's sake. They're within the system. Or thirdly, and what we expect and what we know happens is in the majority of cases, the clients will ask you to proceed with the application. What you can then do is indicate to the client you're going to open a separate fee file. You could negotiate a percentage of the grant. There's quite a common process with the Export Market Development Grant and Research and Development tax incentives for a percentage of the grant or incentive to be claimed. Figures of 10%, some cases 15% get bandied around. Or you can go in and say, no, we'll do it on a professional fee basis, but you give your client the engagement letter so you've got the agreement sorted out. Once the grant's been approved, there is potential work that an accountant could produce. A lot of these grants require business plans, budgets, cash flow forecasts, human resources work, mentoring and guidance to a management team. I'm doing a corporate governance training program in a couple of weeks' time on one of these grants. So there's a wide range of activities that can be done, and you would then open a separate fee file because you'd then be submitting a separate proposal to do the work. Just remember you have to submit a written proposal, and it will be looked at by someone representing the government, whether they're the grant support person, the business advisor, or the actual department themselves. It probably depends how big the grant is. So if it's going through accelerating commercialisation and your client's wanting $1 million in grant, I can assure you that every proposal will be looked at fairly closely to make sure that the government is getting value for their money. So that's how the grant program works. Now I'm going to go back now to the beginning. This is the page that you would normally see when you just visit the site of ESS BIZGRANTS. There's some various information there, including a testimonial from David Smith, Managing Director of Smith Inc. 2020, former President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, who wrote the brief for this product originally, because he found that when he was doing some due diligence reviews of some accountancy businesses that were interested in joining one of the accountant aggregators, that when he interviewed the SME clients, that a number of them were complaining that they were not being kept up to date on government grants, and they were very critical of it. So it was that sort of encouragement that David Smith gave us that we developed this product. So David's written a testimonial there, and which you might care to read. There's a summary there of how ESS BIZGRANTS works, and you can look at a case study. You can go to the pricing area, which will show you that you can log on for a free trial for 2 weeks to try one or two clients just to see how the system works. Or you can immediately subscribe if you're happy with what we've shown you today. The subscription is $43 per month plus GST, or you can get a discounted price of an upfront payment of $450 plus GST. If you wish to sign up, you just click on, and it just asks you some details so that you can be allocated the username and a password, and for the initial trial that will last for 2 weeks. I'm just checking. I've got no more questions, so hopefully we've answered all your questions as we've gone through today. If you think of any other questions that you'd like answered, please send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. Thank you very much for participating in this webinar today. We really do look forward to welcoming each and every one of you as a subscriber to ESS BIZGRANTS. Incidentally, for those of you who were at ESS BizTools information webinar yesterday, please remember what I said, that the ESS BizTools Gold subscription includes the access to ESS BIZGRANTS. So a Gold subscriber gets full access to ESS BIZGRANTS. We've recorded this webinar. We will be sending you in the next couple of days an email with the link to YouTube, whereby you can view the recording of the webinar if you wish, or you wish to show it to any of your colleagues. Thank you for participating. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.